Okay, we have our meeting to get started. Good afternoon, folks. This is the Appointments Committee meeting of April 25th, 2023. It is a remote participation meeting via Zoom link, and those of you who are on here obviously know that. I'd like to start, this meeting actually will be recorded and available on the town website. So if you have any interest in seeing this meeting or previous meetings, that is available. So to start off the meeting, I'd like to take a roll call. Cindy, would you please take care of that?
Certainly. Councilors, Starr,
Here.
Shaughnessy,
Here.
Atzelis,
Here.
Chair of Committee, Paula Schnapp,
Here.
and Councilor Shaughnessy.
You already called me.
I think
Oh,
it's
I'm sorry.
Mendez.
Mendez, I'm sorry, Jeff.
Always the forgotten one. I'm here.
No, I'm looking at trees.
Okay,
You have quorum.
thank you. We full committee here. Next on our agenda is public comment. I see Councilor Ludke, Mr. Schulte, as folks that I know are not applicants tonight. Do you have anything that you would like to speak on before we get started?
I don't have anything, Paula. Thank you. I'm just here to watch. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Just here to enjoy the show.
Okay, great. All right, so we will proceed to our interviewing of candidates this evening. People are welcome to stay on this Zoom or go to the waiting room if you'd like, but you are more than welcome to stay and watch the interviews as they progress. I am going to use the order in which the agenda was created. And that would be first to our two current Conservation Commission members who are up for reappointment. And Larry, are you in the room?
Yes,
Larry?
I am. I was
Okay.
muted.
Okay,
Just a minute.
all right, we'll let you swing in front of
That's
the
Mr.
camera.
Hurwitz. We're looking
hear
for
me now?
Lawrence Moran.
No, I think that's Larry. He's right down
Yeah.
there.
Can you hear me now?
We can, if you could shift just so we could see a little better, that might be helpful.
Me?
Get in front of your camera. Okay. There we go. All right.
All right.
So, thank you. So Larry, you have our current member of the Conservation Commission with a term expiring on June 2023. You are up for a reconsideration of a reappointment to a term expiring 6/2026. So I'd like to ask my fellow committee members if they have any questions for Mr. Moran. Okay, Councilor Shaughnessy, please.
Hello, Mr. Moran. How are you?
Oh, fine. I am.
I have a letter of support here from, I'm assuming, an acquaintance of yours, Mark Ackelson, but I wanted to ask you about your professional background, because that's something I was not on the appointments committee when you were first seated to Conservation Commission, so I don't have the privilege of knowing a little bit about your background or your resume.
Well, thank you. I don't know that some of my qualifications or experience probably hadn't even happened then. I've practiced law for the better part of half a century, and in several different states, and several different backgrounds in that area. When I moved to the Cape in 2000, I found myself doing two different things plus being on the commission in chronological sequence. The first one was becoming a mediator in district court, and then I became a member of the Conservation Commission, and I was also a realtor for 17 years. So all of those things were overlapping, and one of the interesting aspects of that was that I discovered as a realtor what disrespect they had for conservation commissioners. They just didn't want to be questioned about conditions of property, so we had to deal with that. So that was sort of my baptismal, if you will, back back in the early part of this century. Does that give you enough to get started?
I think that's terrific. Thank you so much for providing that.
Counselor Starr.
Oh, thank you. So, Mr. Moran, so my question is about, you've been on the Conservation Commission. Are there any frustrations you have, or maybe it could be, you could explain it in terms of changes you would make in the process?
That's kind of a loaded question. I think that it's natural to have frustrations in this situation. And by that, I mean, we have the vast majority of the hearings that are held, and I think John Abadili will confirm this when his turn, is that most of them get resolved fairly straightforward. We've had many, however, that are not, because there's multiple issues we have to deal with. We also have to arrive at a balance as to how we're going to extract factual information and put it together. So in that regard, I have ideas as to how things could be done, but I don't necessarily know at this point whether to launch those, because we're looking at trying to deal with very complex issues right now. Some are regulatory updates and changes. Some are very complex overlapping applications that get filed. But based upon the experience I've had in many different areas, many of which have been leadership positions in different chairs, I've seen things that can be done differently, but that doesn't mean that means that whatever changes are bad. I think that you always need to improve communication and improve methods of doing things. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Atzelis, I believe I saw your hand up.
Yes, Mr. Moran, thank you for your time and your service on this committee. My question may be somewhat related to my fellow counselor's question, but in your time on the commission, what are some of the most common conservation-related issues that you see coming in front of you and the rest of the commission?
I'm going to start with enforcement orders. We have enforcement situations that come up where people either fail to do what they've been directed to do by previous orders, or they're newcomers to the scene. They may acquire property, for instance, that was previously owned and things were done without authority prior to that. So we have to deal with how to wrestle with enforcement orders and to what extent to place a burden upon new owners or previously existing owners. Other issues deal with the matters of docks and piers, and also buffer zone issues. The buffer zone regulations covered certain areas. They were drafted a few years ago, and many new things are coming up. And so we're having to decide how to work those in, such as the different nitrate systems for septic, that sort of thing. I probably, if I had a chance, I could look through a list, but I'm trying not to look down at things I tried to prepare. Just so you know, I did prepare a list of things, not trying to anticipate what you were going to ask, but just so I'd have the information. And I'd be glad to send that in to Cindy if you'd like me to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Mendez, any questions that you have of Mr. Moran?
Yeah, just one question. Hi, Mr. Moran, how are you?
Fine.
Good. How important is compromise and keeping an open mind on the commission you serve?
That's an excellent question. I think that, to be honest with you about open mind, I think all of us arrive with an open mind. But in the process of reading the filings and doing site visits before the hearing ever commences, it's unrealistic to think we haven't already formed some opinions. But that doesn't mean they're opinions of decision. It's opinions on questions. So but I come in, I always try to balance things. I look at the manner of the more I learn in a process, the better I can resolve a question. I don't make quick judgments one way or the other. And I really try to consider the respect and the desires of the applicant. And as oftentimes we learn a lot from abutters that isn't necessarily even reflected in what's filed. So that's how I try to start off doing it. But the whole idea of compromise is inevitable. And if compromise is not reached, then sometimes applications are denied. And if they're denied, then they either, the applicant will change or they'll go to some sort of appeal. So they don't always reach a compromise and they don't always reach a balance, but that doesn't mean we don't come in with the effort to try to get it there. And I'd like to quote something that came up a while ago about the late Bob Smith, who he was known to have said, it's not our job to deny projects, it's our job to condition them so that they become approvable. And that is, I think, the thing that all of us have tried to follow in the years we've been on the commission. I hope that helps answer your question.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any follow-up questions from the committee? Right.
One question.
Councilor Starr?
I just have one question, Mr. Moran. Would you consider moving the buffer zone back to 100 feet?
I would, one of the things that has frustrated me, and this comes back with Nick Atzelis's question, what are the frustrations? You asked that too. I felt that the starting point is that the zone of notification of 100 feet is inadequate. I think that the neighbors and the citizens should be given notice at a greater distance. I know we've had one project that brings it to mind, which was in Osterville a number of years ago, where the applicant bought up all the properties around his property, so he became his own abutter, and that created some issues. But concerning the 100-foot buffer zone, I can see reasons why the buffer zone perhaps could be described better. Extending the buffer zone further is something that I have not given thought to be honest with you. And I think that we're on the verge of doing that if the commission brings up those issues. I'll bring up whatever issues I think need to be brought up, and other commissioners will as well. I think it's an excellent thought. It's something that it would be wonderful to sit around a table and talk about.
Okay, thank you. I hope sometime you guys get time to do that.
Thank you.
Speaking of time, having served as the liaison to the Conservation Commission for almost 6 years, I know that this is one of, and I've said this to my fellow committee members, one of the hardest working committees that we have in town. It's a tremendous responsibility, and the commitment of all the current members to their work is incredibly admirable. Mr. Moran, how do you balance all the work on looking at the various things that are right before you and, kind of keeping attuned to whatever regulatory changes the state's bringing out or other things? Do you ever have time to kind of expand your universe beyond what you have to do at the Conservation Commission?
All the time. And I would be embarrassed if this camera scanned this room that I'm in, because it's loaded with piles of paper and different projects I work on. I follow up on a lot of projects once they're either approved or denied. The regulatory changes should be something that are reviewed regularly. I don't mean every month, but we're now dealing with regulatory changes that simply need to be vetted and updated. And I think that the way I discover it or deal with it most efficiently, at least in my mind, is that applications bring out where regulations need to be considered for change. So it goes hand in glove in that sense. But I put in hours at night. The only other things I watch to see if the Bruins and Celtics can keep winning. But otherwise, I'm working on these things all the time, and it keeps me younger. Just I like doing that. So I hope that helps you.
Thank you. Again, any other questions from committee members? Okay, so with that, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an insight into our process. As you know, this is sort of one of the appointments committee has sort of entered into a new era of interviewing members who are current and are interested being reappointed when there has been interest expressed by other community members for those committees. So appreciate your willingness to come and be interviewed again, even though you've been a long-serving member.
Well, thank you.
And so we will be taking in consideration the interviews from tonight and from 2 weeks ago. And we will be meeting again in May 9th to complete our process. So just wanted to let you know that we are still in the process of gathering information and making our decision. But you will probably have some more information on the second week of May of how we plan to proceed. And you know that we make recommendations to the full council. The council then has to have 2 meetings before any appointment is made official. But your position obviously is current through June 30th, so there should be no interruption in your work with the commission right now.
Okay.
So
is there any follow-up that you ever want from time to time, or additional information or not?
if you feel there is additional information that would help us in our decision making, you're welcome to send it to us, but there's no obligation for that.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Right. If you have it, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm aware of the process,
Okay.
and I think it makes sense. Matter of fact, I think in some respects the re-interview process is beneficial. It's beneficial for you, but it certainly is for us as well. It makes us think about what we do and what we can do.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again for being part of this process, and have a good meeting tonight at the Concom.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, we will move right along to Mr. Abadili.
Yes, ma'am.
You've also been on the Concom for many years. I don't know when you actually commenced your service.
I've forgotten too. A long time ago.
All right, that's okay. So I will open it up to my fellow counselors for questions.
Can I make kind of an opening set of comments? Would that be all right? I hate to talk
Absolutely. You are more than welcome to do that.
Yeah, and I asked that only because it's interesting. All the time I've been on there, I think this is the first time we've ever been, quote, re-interviewed. And I commend you for that. I think it's long overdue. Secondly, some of you may remember this, but years ago, when I was chairman of the Conservation Commission, we used to have once a year, we'd meet with the town council. And we'd sort of that meeting, public meeting, of course, each commissioner would give 2 minutes of their background and interests, et cetera. And then it would be open to comments, and then be a lot of good feedback. Not all of it good, but very helpful. And I hope that you folks may want to reconsider that sometime going forward. I think that would be great. The commission represents you. You appoint us, and I think it's critical for you to kind of take a look at what the commission does and who they are. So, end of lecture. Sorry, folks.
No, good feedback. Good feedback.
Just by way of background, if I can, I started school. I went to the Boston University undergraduate. I went to Boston University School of Law. While there, I had a chance to write a bunch of law review articles. So that got me into the University of Pennsylvania, where I worked for a professor, authored a book. I taught law in the undergraduate school, got my MBA from Wharton. Finally went to work at a real job at Scott Paper Company in Philadelphia. And then from there, Scott Paper in Mobile, Alabama, which was an interesting time for my family to move to Alabama. It was just really interesting. Worked there for a number of years, and then just moved family back north. So applied for a job at a company called Federal Paper in New Jersey, and worked for them mostly in human resources, doing a lot of legal work, environmental legal work, EEOC, diversity training, those kinds of things. Then when I retired from there, Federal was bought out by International Paper, and after 3 months of negotiating with IP, they finally gave me an agreement where we could retire, and we moved to Cape Cod. I then taught for a few years at Cape Cod Community College through Suffolk University, then had an MBA program there. So I taught there for a few years. I guess I should take questions, but I would at some point, with your permission, like to talk a little bit about the commission, my own views and philosophy on the commission, where it is and where it should be going. And I think the principles we should be living by, but we could leave that up to questions if you'd like.
I think my fellow committee members may go right there. So we'll open it up to questions. Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Abadili. So I'll ask the question. So what is your image? What is your view of the Conservation Commission and where it should go? Throw it back at you.
Boy, good question. Good. That's I'm thinking about that. It's really interesting because when I started in the commission, and it does go back a ways, the commissioners would. Well, let me just go back up. Perhaps some of you experience this when you sit on that podium when we're having meetings. You know, you sit high up in that podium and you tended to look down.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of talking to people and listening. My dad, God rest his soul, used to say, son, God gives you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you learn to listen twice as much as you talk. Sometimes we don't do that. Sometimes I think the commission has erred, and especially when I first joined it, you'd have comments made by, well, why do you need 4 bedrooms when you can live with 3? And I worked with Bob Smith and Ruth Weil for a lot of years when I was chairman to have workshops on the law and what our authority is and how we treat citizens. And I think that's really critical. I think it's critical to treat everybody the same. Recently, as Larry knows, we had somebody come before us that has a 13-bedroom house and wanted to expand it to a 16-bedroom house. We also had somebody who's got a small 1/4-acre lot on one of the lakes and wanted to add a deck. You know, it is critical that we treat them the same. I think it's critical that we listen, especially to the applicants, the consultants, and the abutters. One of the things I've learned over the years, it requires constantly studying. It is amazing how much I've learned. Whereas Councilor Shaughnessy, as you know, as a lawyer, you know, the law is not always black and white, and courts can easily interpret it, as we've seen, and reinterpret it after 50 years of a ruling. But so on the commission, we're obligated, I think, to have consistency in our decisions, because the court standard of review is arbitrary and capricious. And if we change a decision from applicant A to applicant B, that is arbitrary and capricious. That doesn't mean that we can't change a decision after time. There's new science, there's new laws, there's new information presented to us, but the commission is obligated to articulate what those reasons are. And I think that's really critical. I think the other thing for a commissioner is ethics. It is very, very important that we behave ethically. We represent you folks. We represent the town. So that's kind of a quick summary of what I've experienced and my beliefs on the commission.
Do you have a follow-up, Councilor Starr, or?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Councilor Mendez.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Abbott. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello.
It's Abadili, but John is okay too.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you got me?
Gotcha.
We can hear you, Jeff.
Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, no, I apologize. I'm driving and everything else. What is your impression of maybe issues that are coming along at this time in particular, especially with the town going through so many changes? What are some of the issues that you may foresee before you in the near future?
I think it's a really good question because, again, it's interesting. The issues have changed over my tenure with the commission. They've evolved. The science has become far more oriented, far more focused, and far more available. We've got one actually that's coming up tonight where the applicant submitted a 151-page study on why permanent docks are better than seasonal docks. Well, that's a big issue for a lot of homeowners and a difficult one for the commission. But I think some of the bigger issues facing us well, certainly piers and shell fishing is critical to us, and recreational and commercial shell fishing. But I think we've looked at science now that says, is the 50-foot buffer, this question was asked of Larry, is the 50-foot buffer, which we consider sacrosanct, is that sufficient? We do control up to 100 feet from protected wetlands, but we've allowed a lot of building within the 100-foot zone. So should we, in fact, and in fact, I'm helping Tom, the chairman, sort of write some regulations for the commission and the public to consider. Should we, in fact, impose some additional restrictions on that 100-foot buffer zone? The answer for the homeowner who owns 3 acres and has this huge house may be very different than the homeowner who has a quarter-acre lot, you know, on the lake or on the water. And if we pose too many restrictions, we could literally make a building lot unbuildable. But I think the science has changed, the law has changed, and our thinking as a commission is to change. And I think, and Larry sort of mentioned this, we have to face that issue as a commission. I think it's really critical. So I think that's the #1 issue that we should be looking at as a commission. Second thing is, and we don't have the authority or the resources, so I would turn to the town council. So many of the people that come before us, especially in enforcements, they're really good people. They don't know that they did something wrong, and they come in and they feel, oh my God, here I am sitting before these 7 commissioners and staff, and I'm going to go to jail. That's not the case. It's a matter of education, educating people, because fundamental belief is that most of them will care. Most of them will want to do what's right. We don't have the resources to educate. We need your help as a commission to somehow, whether it's within Conservation Division or some other group, Natural Resources, we need to educate the public far more than we do now. And that's an issue that I think is absolutely fundamental and would take away a lot of commission enforcement problems.
That is true. Councilor Mendez, did you have a follow-up? You're muted.
My boilerplate question, what do you think about open-mindedness and compromise?
It is a really good question, because if you're not open-minded, you don't listen, you don't study. The experiences that I've had on the commission have changed me dramatically over my years with the commission, because every time is learning from the applicants, learning from the consultants who are really good, learning from abutters, as Larry said, I think is very, very important. But the problem is, councilors, that sometimes, especially when we have those meetings, sometimes a commissioner comes in with a preset decision or thoughts, and that's not good. And a lot of our meetings are talking to each other as commissioners to reach a compromise. And those decisions have to be based on law. They can't be because I don't like that house. They have to be based on law. We have to understand the limits of authority. And many times, Tom as chairman will say, please limit your comments just to those issues that within conservation jurisdiction. I mean, it came to the thing with the Sheraton where he wants to build all these homes. Well, somebody started to get into, well, look at what's going to do to the tax base, or what about home for the homeless people. Well, those issues, as much as I may want to comment, are not within our jurisdiction. We got to stick to the issues within our authority, and we got to reach a compromise at the end of the day. And if we don't reach a compromise, we better darn well write a good order of conditions, because it's going to go to court. And we've been to court a number of times with some degree of success, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, John. I think according to the letter of support recommendation I have from your committee chair, you've been on the commission since August of 2000. So bravo, right. And thank you.
You're welcome.
I think so many of your comments have been spot on, not just in regard to your own commission, but just in regard to serving the community, whether it be on the town council or any of the boards, committees, and commissions. I want to highlight something that Tom Lee wrote in his letter of support that says, and I think it's very important. One thing I learned from John is that we can agree to disagree during the hearing, and we are friends after the hearing. This is an important spirit for any person serving on the Conservation Commission or any other town boards. You know, I don't know if that's a skill we pick up as lawyers. I don't know that it always makes my clients comfortable to see me being friends with opposing counsel once a hearing is over, but it is the nature of the beast. And it's something I very much, as a town councilor, I think I very much try to stick to, is whether I agree or disagree with a project personally, I got to stay open to all the different, you know, people and comments, and I just have to, because I feel like it's my duty. So I think between what you said and reading your chair's comments about you and your length of service and your passion for this, I really just want to say thank you for your
Thank you.
service and your continued desire to serve, because I know it's a tough committee and I know you guys do a lot of work. So thank you very much for
Thank
seeking
you.
reappointment.
Tom didn't share that with me, but I said, okay, if I call him and thank him afterwards. Thank you.
No.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Escalus.
Mr. Abadili, thanks again for all your service, length of time. It's very impressive. Also, thank you for wishing me happy Easter in Greek.
In Greek.
But I was curious to know, it just came to me, I wasn't going to ask you a question actually, but this just came to me. In your time on the commission, have you noticed that property owners have gotten better at understanding conservation rules and regulations? And if they don't, are you finding that they're doing a better job of pursuing and understanding so that they can avoid enforcement orders and fines and things of that sort? Has it improved?
Yeah, I think really important question. I think that many of the consultants, I think that many of the folks that do landscaping are now very much aware of conservation restrictions. Majority of them, I think, are environmentally aware and, more importantly, environmentally concerned. Some are not. Some homeowners will come before us and you can almost hear it by saying, well, I'll just cut these trees down and worry about it later. But that's not the majority.
Yeah,
I think the majority of the applicants and the consultants that come before us really try to reach a compromise. I mean, they really do. And they're very good advocates. They're probably highly paid, I suspect, but they're good advocates and they try to get what they want. But they also will say, but we know that the commission has this concern. And we're hearing that a little bit more. So I think that's great. But I honestly would go back to a comment I made earlier. And that is the need to educate people. I mean, if we believe that fundamentally, 95% or 98% of the people in Barnstable, our citizens, really care about the quality of our water. I think if they understood what's happening better than they do, we would have a much easier time on conservation and much fewer enforcements. One of the things we've been pushing, we don't have the legal authority yet. So all we could do is ask them to consider these alternative septic systems. Some very big homeowners have said, no, it's too expensive, or I don't want to do it. But a lot of people are saying, yeah, that's something worth considering. And the consultants are willing to go back and bring them to the attention. Zenith Crocker has been a great resource for us. We've learned a lot from Zenith in his organization about these new systems. I spent a whole day out there trying to understand these systems, and I think they're effective. But we also have limited authority to impose. And I understand that. And as a lawyer, Councilor Shaughnessy will understand, you'd like to say you will do it, but you can't. So I think there is a greater understanding. I think things have gotten better. I think most of our enforcement orders are because people made an error, not because they don't care. So I'm not sure if that's totally responsive, Councilor, but
no, it's very thorough. Thank you for your answer. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Any follow-up questions? Okay, so it's hard to call you Mr. Abadili, but I will do that one more time.
No, you don't have to. Abo.
But I know that one of the commission meetings that I attended a number of years ago was focused on that sort of education piece. And I wonder if you could expand a little bit more on how we would go about that. I mean, where are the kind of choke points or the places where we could get that information out to the public?
Why do we need a 50-foot buffer zone? What good does that tree do? All right, so if I cut that tree down, so what? Really, I don't think people understand the critical role that a 50-foot buffer zone provides. And that, by the way, is not state law. That's, thank God for the prior town council, and that's our Barnstable ordinance. And that is so critical. It's a filtration system. I happen to be very blessed, you know, with a family, with good health, with a lot of things, including a house on the water. I live in the Marston's Mills River. And I put in a Title V septic system when we built the house. And I said, boy, am I doing a good deed? That's not necessarily true. So I maintain a 50-foot buffer zone because I really understand. My neighbor, God bless my neighbor, didn't understand it. And, you know, until I saw him cutting trees and I said, whoa, you can't do that. The problem is, Paula, how do we educate the majority of the citizens of Barnstable? You know, and a comment I would make is Darcy and Ed and Emil are phenomenal staff for the Conservation Division. I mean, we really should appreciate the effort and the time and the knowledge that they bring, the support they give to the commission. We cannot exist without them. They don't have the time. They're managing land, they're enforcement orders, applications that are coming in that are very complex. We need to find resources, even if it's not in the Conservation Division, to educate people on the environmental concerns. Our 3 bays are really in trouble. They're really, and I see that. I see the lettuce growing in front of my house, on the back of my house. It's kind of sad. Right.
Well, this isn't the forum to continue this conversation, but I appreciate your interest in it, and you know how the commission can be a voice back to the council, and we may want to revisit at least an annual meeting where the commission has a chance to, you know, speak directly to the council, because I think that we have lost some of that back and forth with some of our committees, and that might be something we want to revisit at some point in the future.
I would support that 100%. It was, again, when I was chair, and then we'd go there. It was not a long meeting, and you know, it usually ended up with the town council, and maybe this is okay, saying to the commissioners, hey, thanks folks for what you do. And that's a pretty nice pat on the back once a year.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, you heard what I shared with Larry in terms of our process.
Yes.
We will be taking all this information into consideration and reconvening in 2 weeks. And I think we'll be making some recommendations back to the town council at that point in time. So do you have any questions of us?
No, just a final comment that I just think that what you folks are doing is, and I know it's your own time. Thank you for doing it. I think it's really great. It's really spiffy. Spiffy, it's a legal word.
Great. Well,
So
we
thank
did a lot out of it too. So thank you.
Okay. Have a good evening.
All right. Good night. Oh. All right, Mr. Gainey. I have actually had a request to move up one of our interviewees since he has an appointment at 5 o'clock. And I would ask the graciousness of some of our other candidates, if they don't mind waiting a little bit, to move someone ahead of you. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, we're good with that. So, Mr. Gainey, if you want to.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So we are the appointments committee. We're a committee, a standing committee of the town council. There's 5 of us who have been appointed to that role. We make recommendations to the full council for our town committees. And I believe you just recently completed the Citizens Academy?
That no,
Oh, you didn't?
I did not.
You did not. Okay, there's several applicants that had. I didn't know if you were one of the, okay.
No.
All right, so you have expressed interest in several boards and committees. And given the amount of time that we have this evening, I'd
Sure.
like to ask if there's any that you have a strong passion for, that you would like us to ask questions about. let me just let you know what is actually available. The
Sure.
Board of Health, there's not a current vacancy, but there is a reappointment that will be coming up at the end of June.
Sure.
The Housing Committee actually does have a current vacancy. The Planning Board has a current vacancy, and then also 3 positions that are up for reappointment. The Waterways has no current vacancies, but there would be 1 reappointment up in June. And then the Licensing Authority also has no current vacancies, but 2 positions up for reconsideration in June. So of those 5 committees, are there any that you feel strongly about that you would like to be interviewed about tonight?
I would say maybe housing and health. Obviously, I'm a retired physician, so that would have some relevance for what I've been doing.
Okay.
But I'd be glad to serve really on any type of committee.
Okay. All right, great. So with that in mind, I will ask my fellow counselors to direct questions regarding a vacancy or positions on the Board of Health or the Housing Committee. So. Councilor Axelis.
Mr. Gainey, thank you for being here tonight.
Sure.
I'll just focus on the Housing Committee. I sense that Board of Health, your background probably is appropriate, but as far as housing is concerned, are you aware of the housing situation here on the Cape? And if so, I'd be just interested to hear your thoughts on it and maybe some ideas you might have of how we could address them.
Sure. So I'm only aware of what I've read in the newspaper, and then also talking to people, neighbors, and contractors about what a difficult issue it is for affordable housing on the Cape for many people. I know a little bit about what was happening over by the golf course, but I don't know all the details of that. Coming from California, I can tell you that housing is an issue there. So outside of that, I don't have a great deal of in-depth knowledge on housing situation here on the Cape.
Thank you.
Any other committee members? Councilor Shaughnessy.
Hello, I suppose we should be calling you Dr. Gainey. I
That's
wanted
okay.
to know, outside of just your town of Barnstable application form, when you indicate your retired profession and your degree, and you've mentioned you're from California originally, I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more
Sure.
background and interests and how long you've been here on the Cape and what was your area of practice, all those good
Sure, all
things.
that stuff. So I'll give the very abridged story. So my parents retired here in the mid-70s, and my wife and I and our 4 kids would visit them frequently, obviously during the summer and some of the holidays. And we enjoyed it so much we eventually bought a house. So we would come frequently. And then we were living in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was in private practice, practicing hematology and oncology. And then about a little over 2 years ago, my parents both became ill. So I took an early retirement and we moved out here to take care of my parents, who have subsequently passed away. But in that interim, we enjoyed being here so much, we decided to move here permanently. So we have several of our children are still back in the Bay Area. So we go back frequently to visit, but we're here permanently to live. And just wanted to get involved in the community. When I was in practice out in California, I was involved in a lot of leadership positions and like to be engaged in the community because if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So just wanted to be get engaged in the community here and willing to help out in any way possible.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I'll say one thing, having lived in Napa for a while, you can at least get in the water here.
Yeah.
The ocean's a little rough in Northern California.
And very chilly.
Very chilly.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank
Sure.
you.
Sure.
Counselor Star Mendez, any? No question. Counselor Mendez.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Doctor.
Sure.
I'm not going to ask you anything about Health and Human Services, obviously. Your resume speaks for itself. But the question I have for you is, when I ask all the candidates, what is your opinion on open-mindedness and compromise?
In one of my roles back in California, I was the chief of staff for the medical staff at a hospital, and it was amazing. You didn't know all the facts, so you knew all the facts, and you really had to keep an open mind and not be swayed by people that were either in power or had some upper hand on things. And then I think compromise is important. I do think there are probably some situations where right is right and wrong is wrong, and so I think a lot of the gray areas is probably appropriate to compromise and find some solutions. I think there's an area where there's clearly the right way or the wrong way, then I think you may have to stand your ground in those certain situations, but you have to be very well educated and very grounded before you take that type of stance, I think.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.
So I'm going to throw out a question, and it's regarding Board of Health.
Sure.
I always am kind of fascinated by the range of things that are considered by our Board of Health. But like today's agenda had, I think, several body artists, getting reviewed, whether they get their license or they can practice in the town of Barnstable. And then there's whether somebody's failed septic system should, if we can wait a little bit longer for a sewer connection, or whether they have to, do something in the interim, to making sure that we have tobacco enforcement in town, so that especially our young people don't have as much exposure to tobacco and cigarettes. Is that something that you feel like you'd want to wrap your hands around, or is that, did you have a different notion of what the Board of Health might be covering?
Yeah, usually the Board of Health would deal specifically with public health related issues.
Right.
Unlike, we'll say, I was practicing in an acute care,
Mm-hmm.
an individual. Obviously, the Board of Health deals with more public health
Right.
issues. But there's still the very similar principles that you would apply in that. And you would clearly have to rely on people that are experts in the area of public health. But I think it's something that, like I said, to be honest with you, I'd be willing to serve in any capacity. So, but if public health is where the need is, I'll be glad to go there too.
Okay, great. And then housing is a committee. So we have what's considered regulatory committees and then advisory committees. And our regulatory committees, like the Conservation Commission, which the two gentlemen just spoke, there's certain, required regulations that they have to make sure that people are following, and they have, quite a bit of actual power in terms of the decisions that they render. Whereas some of our other committees are advisory. The housing would be one of those that, is not in a decision-making capacity as much as an advisory to the town council.
Sure.
But that's an important area in town is, housing. And so the hope is that it will continue to, have the ability to focus and then communicate back to the town council on ways that we should be dealing with our housing issues.
Yeah.
So just wanted to give you a little bit more information
Sure.
about those committees.
Sure. Well, I would imagine, I would anticipate there'd be a big learning curve initially on any of these committees. It's not something I've really done before, but willing to tackle it.
Right, it's great. Again, any other questions from committee members? All right, so what we're doing right now is interviewing candidates for vacancies, and then also if there's a reappointment vacancy, we'll be considering the current members of that committee. So in the Board of Health, we would be possibly interviewing another candidate, excuse me, the current person who's filling that position. So we won't be making any decisions tonight. Our recommendations will be in, the earliest would be May 9th.
Great.
So if you have any feedback from this meeting tonight and, of your interest in these committees, please let Cindy know.
Okay.
And we will take that into consideration going forward.
Great.
And if you have any other questions for us?
No, I appreciate the
Okay.
time you take, and hopefully I can help out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Gain.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Okay, we can return to our posted agenda. We're going to move on to two positions, two candidates for our vacancies in the planning board. And Felicia Penn, Miss Penn, I saw, there you are. Sometimes you just have to find someone on your screen. We will move to you. And I know that you have been a planning board member before, and just like Mr. Abadili wanted to make a few comments prior to our asking questions. Did you have any comments you would like to make, or would you like us to just start with the interview process?
Well, actually, can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Actually, I had a suggestion for him. I was listening to his interview. He was talking about how to get people educated. And
Yep.
It just occurred to me that there's a possibility of an opportunity to partner with AmeriCorps to maybe
Mhm.
help educate people, because they do so much work in environmental health and in,
Mhm.
hacking out the invasive stuff and keeping everything else good, that they have a lot of people that are in between undergrad and grad school, and maybe some of them that are out of grad school, and maybe they're looking into public education when it comes to the environment. So I just, in my head, that kind of went together. So I don't
Sure.
know if he's interested in that or not, but I just thought I'd do that. Yeah,
Okay.
and I will say something. I'm sure somebody's saying, why after an absence do you want to come back? I spent 9 years on the planning board, as
Mhm.
my information to you said. And I think that things have changed a lot, and it's hard for me to say what's going on the planning board, not being a member of that. And so I don't want to make a decision just from looking here, but I don't hear a lot of questions being asked during public on the planning board meetings that I've just looked at and watched, even on TV versus actually zoomed in or anything. And that's been frustrating for me. So I don't know if it's because they don't have the materials in time. I don't know if it's because it's just a new culture on the board, not to participate until the very end. I don't know if it's because, we did a fair amount, as Mr. Abadili even said, and Mr. Moore, and they talked about the education they received, et cetera. We had a fair amount of that when I was on the planning board. Ruth Weil used to meet with us and go over, hey, you're a quasi judicial board. And as a result of that, this is what that means. And this is what you should be listening for. And this is what you should be looking for when you're reading your materials, blah, blah, blah. And da, 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 and the roles, just consistent reinforcement and attention. And I'm hoping that the planning board still gets that. I don't know if they do. If they don't, I'd love to influence a move in that direction, because it's the work they do, just like the Conservation Commission. We have zoning that defines what we want to see in this town. That's what it's there for, saying this is what we want here and this is what we want there. This is how big it can be, blah, blah, blah. If we want to continue to do that, then you need people who really understand their roles, the role of the board, and what can happen. So it's not about what's pretty and what you like. It's really about what works for the town, because the town obviously made the decision to write the zoning the way they wrote it, and they change it when they want to, which they just did for downtown Hyannis, which is fine. And now it's a new set of rules and still have to do that. So I've missed the planning board, to be honest with you. And I think that my experience and my vision for the community can be helpful.
Thank you.
Open to all questions.
Okay. And I'd like to turn it to the committee members. Questions for Ms. Penn?
Mr. Mendez.
Councilor Mendez.
Hey, Felicia, how are you?
I'm very well. Please keep your eyes on the road. I would hate if anything happened to you. I wouldn't
Oh,
be able to live with myself.
No, they're on the road, you know.
Okay.
Well, you know how it is when you're trying to run a business and do all this
Yeah.
stuff. The first question I had for you is a rhetorical question, because I'm sure you can. Familiar with plans and blueprints, so on and so forth. I'm sure you are because of your experience. The second question I had for you is, how do you feel about compromise and keeping an open mind?
Yeah, okay. So the blueprint and plan question is, yeah, I can do enough to get by on that. Do I understand all the engineers' abbreviations and everything they're doing? No, but mostly site plan review takes care of that.
Yeah.
And if we have questions about anything like what a septic system or what a swale is going to do, or what kind of catch basin and how's that going to work or something, there's always staff to help explain that to us, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't feel like I have to really get in the weeds on that. What I do have to get in the weeds in is what they're doing legal, you know, and how does it work? As far as consensus and compromise, as I said in my introduction, and similar to conservation, which you just heard also, being quasi judicial, you know, it's not really about what I as a board member think. It's not really about if we like it or not. It's about, does it work where the rules say it and how the rules say it should work. I am a fierce defender of right and wrong. I mean, in everything, not just zoning and stuff. I mean, in everything. I just hate it when people on purpose break rules and act like it's their right to do so. They have the power to do that. It drives me crazy. But there are always occasions where it doesn't work because of something that you can't predetermine. So the more you read, the more you visit, the more you listen to the applicant, their attorneys, their engineers, the designers, whatever the project is, the more you learn, and then you figure out how to make it comply. If they're not willing to make it comply, then they have to do something. Now, people, that's usually where mitigation comes in. That's a nasty word to some people and they don't like it. But that's kind of what it was created for. This project can't possibly, you know, for example, Exhibit A project, applicant A can't possibly comply with zoning on these 6 things, but they're really, really important to the town that we have this. So they're going to mitigate this by doing X, Y, Z for the town, and the town for the next 60 years will be better off by it. You know, is that good or is that bad? I know. Every situation's different. I never go into anything. I go in with a slew of questions if I've done my homework on it, which I do my homework, but I don't usually go in with a made up mind because I don't know what the applicant's answers are or responses are. So that's a long answer. I'm sorry. I hope I answered your question.
You did and some. Thank you, Felicia.
Thank you.
Counselor Starr.
Thank you. Hello, Ms. Penn. I don't really have so much of a question as a couple of comments that I've seen Ms. Penn at meetings, Cape Cod Commission meetings. She always does her homework. She always has a long list of questions. She's been, you know, lived in Hyannis her whole life. I'm just impressed with her knowledge. She's also the chair of the local comprehensive plan. And I give her credit for that, and good luck with that. It's a big process, I know. And
I'm going to need it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so how is the process, how is the local comprehensive plan moving forward?
Slowly but methodically.
Yeah.
It's very different process this time than it was last time, because last time we had a consultant that was kind of in-house at the time, helping the planning board redo the plan. And each planning board member took a section of the plan basically and kind of went out and met with people in town, et cetera, to update the plan. And then it was mushed together by the consultant, and then the villages all kind of had meetings about their part of the plan and blah, blah, blah. So it's very different process this time. So that's a learning
Yes,
process for me also. I'm not used to other people doing that kind of work. I kind of am used to being in the weeds and actually doing that kind of work. So it's gone into a management level versus a doing level. But I will say that the staff has been terrific between the consultants and the LCPC. And I actually, sometimes it takes a little while to get an answer, but that's okay. As long as you get one, that's fine. And so I look forward to it. It's probably going to be another year. I don't know. I really don't know. It
Okay.
concerns me a little bit that there's a lot of parallel changes being proposed and happening at the same time that the planning's going on.
Yeah.
And like Great Streets. I mean, that doesn't affect the outer villages, but sure heck affects downtown Hyannis, and put the new zoning in while the LCPC was going on and everything. And to me, that's the cart before the horse, but there's always room and
Yeah.
time to make changes going forward and seeing what the outcome of those are.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Counselor Atzelos, is that a?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll stay consistent. Hello, Ms. Penn. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Nick. Thank you.
So obviously, like many of us on this meeting, some more than others, we've been here a long time. Certainly the town has changed. What do you see? How do you feel about change? Some might associate that with growth within the town of Barnstable, the planning board's impact on that. What's your opinion of how the planning board should manage growth and change?
Well, I just think it's up to the planning board to implement the master plan, which is the LCP. Okay, in the LCP, it talks about change and vision and land use policies, et cetera, for every area in town. And I don't think that the planning board should have reflex action to certain things. I think they should look at the doctrine that we've created. I think they should look at the parameters that are there and interpret it accordingly. Do I think Barnstable should double its population? Doesn't really matter what I think, to be honest with you. I just have to do my job on the planning board, and whatever the guidance tells us, that's what we implement. Personally, though, do I think Barnstable should double its population in 50 years? Maybe. In 20 years? No. I don't think we have the infrastructure. I don't think we have the drinking water. I mean, I think there's big stuff that we'd have to do first to have that happen. So, but, on a case-by-case basis, nobody comes into a planning board meeting that I'm aware of and says, so guys, what do you think we should do about these 850 acres over here that they call, Barnstable Village, Comaquid, and whatever on the north side? You think we should change all that and throw the Old Kings Highway out and change all of that stuff? Yeah, no, nobody's asking those questions. That's why we have the LCP. It's already supposed to define what happens in those areas. And then the policy, which is zoning, it appears, comes through in zoning, then we implement that. We defend it and implement it. That's the job of the planning board. And give here and there when you need to.
Thank
Did I
you.
answer your question?
You did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Counselor Shaughnessy.
Hello, Miss Penn, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Ever since becoming a town councilor, you communicate quite a bit. You are a very active resident of the town. But what I want to say is, as a town councilor, someone mentioned earlier, sort of the learning curve coming onto these committees. Well, it's no different as a town councilor. So I have had a deep appreciation and recognition very early on that this is a resident of the town who's got a lot of history on these different committees, knows the background and history on a lot of different projects that have happened historically throughout the town. And also reading here in your cover letter, which I was not aware of, that you were part of the team putting together the LCP that we're currently relying on. Although I was happy to see you on the local comprehensive planning committee. I don't know that I recalled that you were the chair, so I'm excited that you're heading that crew, because I don't think I could think of someone better for the job. So at least in terms of my personal knowledge of your knowledge of the policies of the town, the role of the planning board, the role of different committees, I think you're an excellent committee for any committee member for any committee, board, commission, town council. And that's outside of the fact that, your family has a legacy on Cape Cod that is, what are we talking, 160 years now?
Oh,
Something
period.
like,
Yeah, since 1925,
I thought it was even
1919.
long.
1919, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I thought it was longer. I thought you were
First
right
store
up.
in first store in Plymouth, and in Chatham, it was 1925. First store in the Cape in 1925, but Plymouth was 1919.
Right. But I think, that's important because you've grown up with this legacy and love of the area that goes back for generations. And clearly you care, clearly you do your homework. And I think you've also made some great comments tonight about, understanding sort of the position of impartiality and fairness that you have to come from when you are on a board or committee or commission. So I'm curious, I don't know if this is a question so much, but it'll be a little bit specific. I know that, and I would like to talk to you more when different projects come up, because I love to hear your position, because again, you are a wealth of information. I know we spoke when the Walgreens project came up, and you had a number of concerns with the project, as did I. But I sort of, remembering back to that conversation, one of the things that perhaps I struggled with was I was just so happy to finally see something happen with the VFW parking lot, liquor store eyesore that had sort of subsisted there for so long. And sort of my recall of some of your comments was like, well, the side of the building that faces Staples is rather ugly. Or I want to make sure that, the plantings, one, I don't think there's enough on the plan, but it'd be nice to see more. And I don't know that I necessarily disagreed with you, but I certainly, at least in terms of what was there, what was existing, and what was being proposed, I mean, to me, it was such an improvement that I didn't feel I'm going to say no to the project based on that. So I guess what I'm getting at, and I also thinking of the Twin Books property, and please correct my recall if it's not right. My belief is that you were opposed to when there was a proposed performing arts center there. And if you were, I can't say that memory, I recall the reasons now. I guess what I'm getting at is whether or not, if it comes down to compromising on one or two items that you don't agree with versus the project as a whole. You know, is that something, or are you willing to, is there give and take there?
Yeah, so you're talking about waivers, about the land, the
Yeah.
Walgreens thing, the
Yeah.
landscape waivers and this and that and whatever. Well, look
Yeah.
at it now. So you tell me what the final result is, if you like that or not. I'm kidding you. Of course, on each individual
I
issue,
love the drive-through window, Felicia.
just the one though, not the other one, right? You can't talk about that now. I know that. That's, every waiver stands on its own. So you discuss it, you look at it, look at the importance, some make it, some don't. The whole idea of a regulatory agreement is, the difference between a development agreement and a regular agreement is that a development agreement means this is how we want to develop this, but it's everything's conforming with zoning. A regulatory agreement has exceptions to zoning, and that's therefore it has waivers in it. So you have to pick and choose which waivers are essential for the success of the project and which ones aren't. So if you believe that the project has a good value for the community, then you figure that out. And the rest of them, you just say, hey, we've given enough, because we got to give and get too. I mean, the town cannot just throw away, it's planned for that strip of road, Route 132, between Airport, Rotary, et cetera, et cetera. I think I argued this point consistently during that project. Was the whole idea was to neutralize traffic intensity there and to not intensify it anymore. And if you start putting drive-through windows there that are not allowed there unless you're a bank, then it totally overrides the point in the plan. So you have to discuss, is it life and death? Do we really need that? Or can people actually get out of their car and go into a Walgreens and pick it up at the pharmacy counter like everybody else does? I don't know. You tell me. So, yeah, I can, you have to pick and choose if you think the project is valuable asset to the community. And obviously it's up to the applicant to show you why it is a valuable asset to the community. I don't know. I can't answer that question without reading the information. As far as the Performing Arts Center, the whole point of that was because the LCP says, that was on the West Main Street Rotary, and they were going to have outdoor music, which also, would have conflicted with the Melody Tent and, this, that, and whatever. It wasn't just a performing arts center as we know it today.
Yeah.
Personally, I like the sound at the current Performing Arts Center at the high school. I think it's fabulous. I'm a symphony conscript, I go to every classical concert that they have, and it's a wonderful event. But they want to have beer and wine and things like that, et cetera, so they wanted their own home. Had they kept it a performing arts center with one concert a month, I think it's manageable traffic-wise. But the LCP specifically states that you can't intensify traffic on the West End Rotary. I mean, it's written in the plan. So how can I, as a planning board member, defend that? How can I go out and argue and say, oh, no, we've got to congest the Rotary even more than it is? That's irresponsible, in my opinion. So that's why I was opposed to it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councilor Atzlis.
Thank you. So since the topics of personal opinion versus being on the planning board and waivers, it's causing me to think along these lines. And I know that you were expressed a lot of concern about the dockside project, the condominiums that were going to go up there. And some of your concerns that you highlighted were the height of the building, lack of parking, density over there. And that was as a non-planning board member. As a planning board member back in 2013, the planning board at the time unanimously approved the Hyannis Harbor View project. And that ended up being a 4-story project where 2.5 were allowed. There were, they were looking for waivers for parking. And, so some of the same waivers that were of concern as a non-board member for the Dockside project were similar waivers to that, and that was unanimously approved. I guess I'm trying to get my head around the difference between your thought process then versus now for similar type of waivers and concerns. That would be helpful for me to understand.
Yeah, I didn't like the Harborview project either. The waivers for parking were not given. The applicant was supposed to have stacked parking, and they were supposed to have a full-time parking attendant on duty so that they could keep the parking people, their customers on site and not encroach on the restaurant or anything else around them. Unfortunately, this town does a terrible job of enforcement. They never did the stacked parking, and then now we have a really big parking problem there from the Harborview Motel. And I have complained to the town several times that they never met the terms of their regulatory agreement, and there was no reaction to that. So after a few years, you kind of give up, you know what I mean?
I hear you.
But that's a big problem when you do major waivers like that, and you're absolutely right to bring stuff like that up, because if you give a major waiver, and it took, Michael Ford was his attorney. I think he still is their attorney. And we went back and forth on this parking thing. It was the last stroke to get this project passed, okay? And you of all people also know what a hazard parking is down here sometimes. And, they knew they couldn't get it passed if they didn't give. And that was their solution to the problem. The problem is it wasn't implemented. So that's a problem with waivers. How do you enforce them? And that's going to be something that I would push for big time, because there's more and more regulatory agreements in this town. As far as the height and the density, it's across the street from the water, number one, as you know.
Mhm.
And it's next to already a motel that's already there. So the density per acre was already apparent. Okay, it's just in a smaller space. It's vertical versus horizontal. Density is density in my book. So that was already there. And the mitigation, which I don't recall right now what it was, but there was quite a bit of mitigation for drainage, I believe, systems, et cetera, et cetera. It's a while ago. My brain's not as good as it used to be. But good for you for bringing that up as a consistency. I was not for it. I met with Doug Cohen and his brother and Mr. Ford several times to try to get it down a story, just one story. And they actually started out higher, and it ended up here. And the 4th story on that building is the mechanicals.
Yeah.
They originally were going to go for a rooftop barbecue
Bar.
kind of thing,
Yeah.
and yeah, it would have been great during the fireworks, and it's like, yeah, I don't think we need a party town on the roof of a hotel in the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So the mechanicals ended up on the 4th floor, actually, to make more room for parking. And so actually, maybe that's the rooftop, not the 4th.
Yeah, that's
So
they
you
did
have
that,
4
yeah,
levels of rooms.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
did that after the fact.
Right.
They added that.
That's because when they dug the foundation, they had a lot more water than they thought they were going to have. They ran into some serious problems when they were first doing that.
Mhm.
So,
Okay. Got it. All right. So the net of it then is, as you said earlier, separating, you have to be able to separate personal belief from what's in front of you on the planning board and making decisions based on the regulations, the regulatory, correct?
absolutely.
Yep. Okay.
The regulatory agreement is a huge, powerful instrument. And that's something that I think everybody just takes for granted now. And to me, they're horrifying, because it's just a magic wand to make all the rules go away and to do whatever you want. And that, there isn't a town on Cape Cod that has that, except for us. And that's why we end up with some of the stuff that we do. It's very, very, very scary. And originally, this is the thing, when I got off the planning board that freaked me out, actually. We had the growth incentive zone. And only in the growth incentive zone, when it was new, could you have a regulatory agreement. That was the only place, because the town said, we want to incentivize growth here. And if you can't compromise, if you can't meet the zoning, then we'll give you the instrument of having a reg agreement, so you can waive the zoning that you absolutely need. But then the town, X amount of years later, I don't even know when it was, but I was off the board by then, puts in a regulatory agreement map that's way outside of the growth incentive zone. The whole idea of the growth incentive zone was, we want intense growth here, and we don't want the growth elsewhere outside of it. Okay, that's good planning. Do it here, not there. And then the town makes a separate regulatory agreement map. So you take the most powerful tool you have in the growth incentive zone, the most thing that you have to incent, it's the carrot that you're hanging in front of somebody to make them build in the growth incentive zone. And you dilute it entirely. You just let the air out of the balloon and made a regulatory agreement map in all these other places in town. So now there's no incentive at all to build in the growth incentive zone. Why? It boggled my mind. Never understood that, why that happened. So when somebody stands up and says, we didn't get the growth we wanted in the growth incentive zone, we have to change zoning. It's like, well, no kidding. You just diluted the power up from it and spread it out all over the place. So why would anybody build there? So that's always been my, a point of concern for me. I never understood it.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up on that concern. Do you think with the implementation of the new form-based code zoning in that downtown area that we could walk away from regulatory agreements?
I think it'd be wonderful to get rid of regulatory agreements. Okay. What it does, though, is the idea of the reg agreement was to streamline permitting, so that
Right.
the applicant only had to come to the planning board. They didn't have to go to ZBA or anyplace else. What it's
Right.
going to do, if you get rid of reg agreements, is build up the work for the ZBA. Because people will be appealing zoning and then going back to the planning board.
Right.
So it just puts your process backwards.
Right. Ms. Pan, just a quick question. I share Councilor Shaughnessy's view that your homework and voice and providing information to the full council on a lot of issues regarding our community that especially focus around planning and regulatory agreements has been extremely valuable for many of us. Even if people don't agree with it, it raises the questions that we should be looking at, I think, in a lot of issues. Would you feel at all reduced in your influence if you were sitting on the planning board and really had to quiet that voice to the full council? Or do you feel like the opportunity to be back on the planning board would far outweigh that?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot before I put my application in. You get a lot of freedom out here on the outside, stirring the pot as much as you want.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, I think that I asked that, I don't know if it's because of Zoom or if it's because of new rules or new leadership or whatever on the planning board, but I don't ever hear too many people asking questions before, when I was on the planning board actually wrote the reg agreement with the applicant during meetings, or the applicant would come in with the reg agreement, and then we'd go paragraph by paragraph, page by page. So it was all done in the open, public could do it. And everybody was asking questions. Planning board members are asking questions. Staff was asking questions of the applicant's answering. He's got all his, everybody there. It was pretty productive time. So by the time you get to the point of getting to, they're all public hearings, but there's no voting happening because you're just constructing the document at this point in time. The public could have input at the same time. As the gentleman earlier tonight said, you learn an awful lot from the public and what their views are, because
Mhm.
you're in your position. So I just think my ability to ask questions and to maybe add some historical perspective at the planning board level would create a different document at the end, so that the need for somebody like me to have to write a 4-page epistle, what's wrong with the regulatory agreement that I'm reading online, would be lessened. That would be my hope. Now, whether that's possible today with the way the board functions, I don't know. I don't have a clue.
I understand that feeling for some of the projects that have come before the planning board, but I've also witnessed an incredible investment of time and education on the planning board for certain recent issues that have been before them. And I speak about dockside and also the solar array ordinance, both of which I have been truly amazed at the dedication of the planning board members. So I think that, there historically have been maybe some things that have gone before the planning board where there hasn't been as much, questioning of the project. But, again, maybe the planning board members at that time felt that it was adequately discussed, and perhaps not enough public comment to make them relook at, what is before them. I think that some issues get a lot of public attention and others don't. And so I think that sometimes that guides how the planning board responds to what's in front of them. So, but it's not here for my comments so much as to get any questions answered by the committee. Are there any other questions or comments? I did want to let you know that Councilor Mendez did need to leave the meeting. He plans to watch the full proceedings at a later time, but he was unable to continue to be here. So the 4 of us will have to be competent to ask the questions going forward. So any other questions for Ms. Penn? And Ms. Penn, do you have any questions of us? You had heard that, we will be taking the information from the last 2 meetings, and we will be also interviewing the candidates, the current members of the planning board who are up for reappointment at our May 9th meeting. So we won't be making any recommendations either for the vacancy or those reappointments until that time.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for being with us tonight, and you're welcome to stay or.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, we're going to move right along. Stacey Gunther is also has applied for membership on the planning board. And are there any introductory comments you'd like to make to the committee, or would you like us to jump in and ask questions?
You can certainly jump in. Thanks for being here and for having me, for interviewing me.
Okay, great. So, Councilors, Atlas, would you like to ask the starting questions?
Yes. Thank you, Ms. or Mrs. Gunther, for being here tonight. So thank you for sending your resume. I appreciate your background. I was actually in IT staff. I was in IT staffing for a number of years, placing executives in the IT industry. So I understand to a certain degree what you had to do as an executive search consultant. So you're applying for the planning board. So my biggest question right now is, what's your familiarity with the planning board, its functions? Do you have any experience, any knowledge? What do you bring to the table as far as the planning board is concerned?
Yeah, well, my background is I do have a very strong business background and a nonprofit background, having worked for nonprofits and volunteered for them. In relation to the planning board, I'm just very, very interested in contributing to our community. I have been watching what they do, and I'm very impressed by them, and I'd like to make a contribution. I've never served on a planning board before. Felicia's a really hard act to follow. I so respect her and admire her path. So I'd be considered, I think, more of a junior person, if you may, in some ways. But from my background, Nick, I've always been able to take on really difficult projects and tasks. I'm a really quick learner, and I've always been considered a person with extremely high integrity, someone that's really been able to just follow through. I'm a doer, and I want to be able to take some of my just general skill sets and contribute to the town in some way. And I have watched a lot of like the videos, if you may, and I feel like the planning board has just a lot of impact on our community. And that is one of the reasons why I was attracted to it. Also, I did notice, I was looking for orientation or classes that I could perhaps take, if I had the opportunity to serve. And I noticed there's a citizens, I'm reading something, I took notes, sorry, a citizen planner training collaborative. I thought that it's a state-run program, and I'd be more than willing to take some of those classes to bring me up to speed. But just rest assured, I had my own business for many, many years. I also worked for a very large top-tier firm, and I've always taken on things and have been hired for things repeatedly that were outside of my initial scope. I just didn't really, but that's not why I was hired. I was hired because I had a lot of common sense. People knew, they knew I would take on, like, as I mentioned before, a pretty challenging project and see it through completion. And I'm not afraid. I'm also the kind of person, I'm not afraid to ask questions. I think that is, and I've witnessed some of our great town staff people. I think that we have great resources. So I feel like if we were to work as a team, I'd be a good team member. I hope that somewhat answers your question.
I just have a follow-up.
Sure.
So this is my opinion. I'm not speaking for my other members of the appointments committee, but the planning board, in my opinion, along with conservation, zoning board of appeals, those to me are boards and committees that people need to be able to come in and almost hit the ground running. So I'll just say it right now. My concern is that you self-admitted that you would need time to get knowledge and experience and understanding, and to a certain degree, I don't know if the planning board is one of those boards where we can afford to have that. We have some folks with experience who are applying. We just interviewed one before you, another one a couple weeks ago. So I'm just curious of, given that, I guess, why the planning board? I'm still just trying to understand that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I respect your opinion. I would say that every committee, in my opinion, would benefit from people with different backgrounds and different perspectives. And I don't know the background of all the current planning board members, but maybe you can tell me, Nick, when all of them started, did they have planning board experience before they joined?
Oh, I can't answer that. I didn't.
Yeah, I neither. Either.
Mhm.
So that's what I guess that's where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm. Any other areas of interest that you have, of the 32 boards and committees that we have?
I can take a look at them for sure, Nick. But at the moment, like I said, I was just very interested in. I've been thinking about it for several months. And then I saw that in June, some things, that there was a possibility that there might be some openings coming up. So, and then and after I put together, I think, my paperwork, I saw there was a resignation too. But but I, that's my answer.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Other committee members? Counselor Starr? No? Counselor Chauncey? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Hello, Stacy. How are you?
Oh, hi, Counselor Chauncey. Hi, Tracy.
The name I am most often called, not my own.
Yeah, me too.
Um, I understand what Counselor Atzelis is getting at, and I don't think it's so much that I became a town councilor with little to no experience. And I know we have had planning board members. I think more so at the present time, you've got some really stiff competition, including 2 former planning board chairs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's a great resume. The appointments committee could use a headhunter. But also that you were doing that in areas I think that are sometimes more difficult to recruit for, and also a lot more specialized where you'd have to have knowledge. I know you're newer to the town, at least in the grand scheme of things, but I, much like Nick, want to say, I think we'd be lucky to have you on any of our board committee commissions. So if you do not get planning board, I would love it if you would take a look and apply, because I think you'd be excellent. And I also thank you so much for volunteering Meals on Wheels,
Oh, you're
because
welcome.
as you know, sometimes you may be the only visitor they have. So I
Yeah,
just think
and
it's,
also they've also given me a lot of insight into the needs of the town and to issues like affordable housing. And you'd be surprised how much Meals on Wheels driver, it's really about them. It's really about them. And they are extremely intelligent people
Yep.
who have lived here for a long time. They understand what's going on, and it's given me a very good view into some of our needs, not only, like I mentioned, in healthcare, but in in housing, but in healthcare. It's another area that I would hope there'd be some growth, if you may, or an improvement in Barnstable. It's really difficult for not only those people, but just normal everyday people to secure a doctor on Cape Cod. There's a waiting list. It's challenging. So
yeah,
anyway, but yeah, and yeah, I have done that. And I did that, yes, I am new, Tracy, and we came here in 2017. And I've also been involved with Homeless Not Hopeless. And
yeah.
they're another great organization that really should get a little bit more publicity, I think. Let's put it that way. But that's also given me a lot of insight into the needs of our community. And I think someone like me brings a lot to the table, even for the planning board. And maybe, you just both mentioned I have stiff competition, and I understand what you're saying, of course, for this particular role, but perhaps if they're in June, if there are other people, if you decide to this time go with someone more experienced, in your view, if there are other openings that come up, I hope you won't discount me, because I'm a well-rounded, very open-minded, interested citizen. And that is, I've always been told ever since I've moved here, these committees are for people that are just like that are just interested in serving their communities. And I'm very bright. I'm good, am I an engineer, Nick? No, of course not. But I've had to read long involved financial reports during my whole career and understand them quickly, and then implement, and make suggestions, give advice, compromise. I've also I worked for a top tier charity in New York City for years. So it's just that I have a very interesting mix here. And anyone that knows me, that's met me in this community, knows that I dig in and I get things done, and I work very well with people. And I do think that I would bring value to the planning board. I've been watching, I really admire like the School Street project, for example, how thorough and how hardworking those committee members are. And I would like to be part of a group like that. I think I could bring a lot. I think I'd surprise you all. There you go. And I'm not just trying, but I'm not very
Speaking
good
for
at selling
myself, and I'm
by
sure
the way.
Counselor
Yeah,
Atlas too.
it's fine. No,
I
I'm not
have
very good
no
at selling
doubts
myself.
about your very articulate and intelligent.
Yeah.
I think more what I'm gunning for is if we can't get you on the planning board, can we
Yeah.
please have you for something else?
Yeah, and we can have another conversation for
It's
sure.
more of
I mean,
I don't want to lose you.
You have so many other people on the call. I understand. We can talk about it another time offline over a cup of coffee. It'd be great. I would love that.
No, but I think it's a really great resume. You know, I believe you when you say that you have had to work with some maybe not bullheaded people, but you know, having to reach compromise and having to deal with some fairly high people, you know, as I'm reading investment banking capital markets. I mean, I have a pretty good sense of the types of people you would have been dealing with. So I have
Yeah.
no doubt about those abilities.
Yeah.
But
I wasn't, just keep in mind, I wasn't.
and I
an invest-
completely
I was-
agree with your
yeah,
comments about
Yeah.
Meals from Wheels and the amount of information you can glean,
Yeah,
because they are happy to share. And I think they're, you know, a big untapped resource in a way as well.
yeah,
And I am familiar with the property on Baxter, which is in my precinct.
yeah.
I've been there a few
They're always
times,
full.
knocked
There are
on their
never any
doors.
There are never any openings in Baxter or the other 3 homes. Never an opening. That has been, yeah, pretty eye-opening. There's always a waiting list to get into those homes. Always.
Yeah, but I mean, I appreciate the fact that you have chosen 2 very specific populations to work with. And that does give you a lot of insight into, you know, what's happening behind the scenes. So
Yes,
thank you very much for applying,
you're
Stace.
welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Gunther, I'd like to just return back to more the focus of the planning board. And are there any issues that have recently been before the planning board or you anticipate will be coming to the planning board that are of particular interest to you?
I would think, well, affordable housing is of interest to me. I think the recent uptick in the population of Barnstable and
Mhm.
how Barnstable deals with that is of interest to me. So those 2 things I think would come before the planning board, whether it be in a proposed affordable housing project somewhere, or whether it be a combined kind of project. One thing I found interesting about I was watching, as I mentioned, some of the videos from the Dock Street, from the School Street project. And it was a difficult decision that they had to make for that project, a really difficult decision. And I did find that the amount of affordable housing, I realized it was a give and take situation. I thought it was interesting. But projects like that, I think, belong in Barnstable somewhere. And the planning board, I think, my impression anyways was that maybe it didn't belong there, but perhaps another project like that, but somewhere else. I think, you know, environments to to really keep builders happy is a good thing. You know, we want to keep builders, doing projects here. So anyway, that's my answer. If there were more affordable housing villages, if you may, I don't know the name of it, and you all might. There's a very cute little community on Osterville, West Barnstable Road between 28 and the entrance to the dump on the right. I think it's 624. I so wish there would be more. Actually, one of my Meals on Wheels customers lives in there. And I wish there would be more of that kind of development in Barnstable. There's like such a shortage, and they're all like, they're townhouses, they're duplexes. It's just a charming community. It's not just a big box of apartments. It's a true community up there. And I would love, builders to be incented or whatever, or just to come and put more of those kinds of developments in Barnstable. I don't know if you know where I mean. It's on the right.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
it's actually a community land trust that developed that.
And I don't know the obstacles to doing something like that. You would know better, but it would be, it's one of the better places I've witnessed around here for people at different income levels, different ages. I mean, you have international families living in there, you have senior citizens. It's quite interesting. And some of the people I've met there have been able to buy in actually at a very low level. And then if they ever sell, they can't sell for much more than what they bought it for.
Right.
So,
Deed restricted.
yeah, it's interesting. So anyway.
Good. All right. Any other questions? Councilor Esselis.
Thank you. And Ms. Gunther, you mentioned that project in Osterville, West Barnstable Road. Do you have any ideas or suggestions where you think a project that would be, suitable, or else in town that something like that?
Can I give that some thought? I would love to give that some thought and get back to you. I probably will have some ideas actually, but yeah, I will give it some thought. I'd love to have a conversation with someone who initiated that project, to be honest, and talk with the builder about what the obstacles were to getting there. And then I would love to come back to you with some ideas. Maybe Marston's Mills over, where there's some open land. It would have to be obviously zoned appropriately, right? But the people that live there are very happy. They're also able to rent out their units, and they have a cap on them though. So they can't rent them out, at market rates. And but if I could get back to you, I would love to, and if you know who built that, I would love to have a conversation with them. I think it's an example of something that Barnstable could do to address its affordable housing situation and just modestly priced housing. It doesn't always have to fall into affordable, but just modestly priced.
Thank you.
There was also something just before, there was this affordable housing. There was something at the Cape Cod Community College on Sunday, a seminar. I don't know if this would be great if it was a recording of this on Channel 18. I do watch Channel 18. I don't know if this was on it. I don't think so. But do you know what I'm talking about? It was
Yes.
yeah.
Right.
It would be great if more people could have, I didn't know about this until the day after, and that's on me. But it'd be great if more people could participate in something like that, and maybe just view the recording for now.
Great.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gunther. Do you have any question, or Counselor Starr, do you have a question now?
No, I'm all.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay, great. All right, so you probably heard my conversations about to other interested applicants that we are going to be taking our various interviews into consideration, probably when we meet on May 9th. So if you can be
Thank you.
patient to hear back from us. And if you
course.
have questions or comments you want to forward to Cindy in the meantime, you're more than welcome to do that. If you have any follow-up to this interview. All right.
Great, thank you,
Okay,
Paula.
thank you very
Great,
much.
have a good evening, bye-bye.
All right, have a good evening. All right. So I'd like to thank some of our candidates who've been waiting quite a while in the wings. Mr. Hurwitz, are you available to be interviewed at this point in time? There you are.
Here I am.
Thank you for waiting.
No,
Mr. Hurwitz, I believe you were a recent graduate of the Citizens Academy.
yes, my wife and myself.
Okay, great. And you've expressed interest in several committees, some which have current vacancies and some that don't. One is the Infrastructure and Energy Committee, which does have current vacancies. The Recreation Commission, which doesn't. But Cindy, could you clarify when you say one member position available on 6/30, do we have a resignation that's coming up, or?
We do, but I cannot remove them till their expiration date. They chose not to continue with
Okay.
their term. It's a current member that sits, but would like to sit until June 30th when his term is up. And
Okay.
then he chose not to be reappointed. So it'll be a
Okay.
vacancy as of June 30th.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then Waterways, no current vacancies, but there is a reappointment. And then Zoning Board of Appeals, actually, we have current vacancies. So is there any of these committees that you would like to focus on this evening in your interview?
Well, I really am open to suggestion. You know, I've tried to give you my experience, and maybe you can help me channel that to the right board or committee.
All right. I don't have your information right in front of me. So if you might want to remind us, I know that I have quite a lot of information, but.
Yeah, I have a lot of construction experience. My
Okay.
family has been electrical contractors for almost 80 years.
Okay.
I've been involved in negotiating contracts, union contracts, business contracts. I'm also, you know, I'm a mechanic also, but you know, a lot of office procedure for the past probably 30 odd years. I'm semi-retired. I still work for a woman-owned electrical contracting business in Sandwich. I'm helping them to improve their office procedures and everything. But, you know, I would not let my prior job influence any decisions I needed to make.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's, you know, work life and public life, and they can't mix. What I have heard throughout this from two very common questions is about compromise and open-mindedness. Right? The definition of a compromise is when both sides aren't happy. You know, I mean, that's what negotiating contracts is all about. I feel I'm very good at compromising. I will admit at some point, maybe I do make some rash judgments, you know, but I've been able to overcome that recently. And I try and keep an open mind. You know, I appreciate other people's points of view.
Great. You know, I did find your information, and that you had also taken an interest in our comprehensive wastewater management plan and the wind project. So you've been involved with that. I'm going to put a stake out there and say that I'm thinking the Infrastructure and Energy Committee might be of greater interest, or our vacancies on the ZBA. And I would look to my other committee members to see if they have any feedback or would like to start the questioning in a way that we might be able to find the best place for Mr. Hurwitz to help our community. Counselor Atzelis.
I would agree with you on as far as those two suggestions. Mr. Hurwitz, thank you for being here tonight. I do recognize and appreciate your attendance and input at the various meetings that are happening within the community and within our village. And especially listening to some of your comments last evening at the Cape Cod Commission meeting. I feel like you have your background would be conducive potentially to Infrastructure and Energy Committee and Zoning Board of Appeals. And one of the nice things about the ZBA is, before you become a full-time member, they do have associate membership, associate board members as well. So it gives folks the opportunity to, learn more about the ZBA. And I think that I have a sense that you would be a quick study there, but I'll let you chime in on my comments to see if that's something that would make sense to you.
I think both your comments make sense. Both opportunities, I think I could serve well at. I am very interested in renewable energy, and I have a strong background in that. So that's why I've been following the Vineyard Wind and the various wind projects, to see how those develop.
Counselor Starr.
So, hello there, Mr. Hurwitz. So I'm actually the liaison to the Infrastructure and Energy Committee, and some of the projects they're looking at the moment. Well, one side is food waste, which doesn't match your your background at all. But they're also looking at electric vehicle charging stations, where to put them, how many to put in. The town is sort of looking at grants that may come through. And we do have a lot of solar photovoltaic cell installations all over town, with 6 or 7 large ones. So that there are some, what I think of as electrical issues being considered. So you think you could match up with any of those projects?
I'm very well aware of all the solar installations in Barnstable. And the electrical vehicle charging, that's coming. That's very important. And I think there's a lot of research that needs to be done so to make the correct decisions on where and how to install them. But both those topics you suggested are very important to me.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Counselor Shaughnessy.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Hurwitz, and congratulations on your recent graduation, you and your wife.
Thank you. It was a great course.
I pushed my husband into doing it, as you know, and he really, really enjoyed it. Said you had a great class. I asked him about the two. I said, now, what do you remember about them from class, honey? And he says, well, I remember they asked very thoughtful questions. So anyways, congratulations to both of you. I did it many years ago and I loved it. And I probably wouldn't be sitting here as town councilor today if I hadn't participated in that program way back when. I just thought it was fascinating. I wanted to ask you, I know you're still doing some consulting. I think you'd be great on Infrastructure and Energy Committee. But I also think you have a resume that can do more than that. So I guess my question for you is, still consulting for the all-female veteran-owned business, yay, and Sandwich. Do you think you'd have the capacity to be on 2 committees? Because I feel like you could also be a great asset to the Zoning Board of Appeals with sort of your background, not just in the electrical field, but also in construction. I think, you could offer quite a bit to that committee. What are your thoughts on potentially serving on 2 town committees?
Well, I had that same thought. All right. And at the graduation that we had, I asked that question to someone, and it seems like it would be a tremendous amount of work. All right. So I wouldn't want to accept a position like that and then let you down.
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, if it's more, if it makes more sense to serve on one committee and do a good job than serve on two and not do such a good job, you know, that's really my answer.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So Mr. Hurwitz, would you prefer we choose for you, or would you like to give us your preference before concluding your interview tonight?
I don't have a preference. I think
Okay.
that you know where your needs are better than I do.
Okay.
Okay?
Well,
So,
we will take
you know,
that into consideration then.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So you'll hand it over to us. Again, we probably are going to defer all of our decision making until in 2 weeks. So that'll give us time to mull this over. If you have any change of heart and would like to put all your eggs in one basket, you know, definitely let Cindy know, and we will take that into consideration. All right.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other questions for us? Are we?
No, I'm good. You know, I've because I took the town government class, I kind of have an idea of what I'm getting myself into.
Okay, good.
I look forward to it. And the only other thing I want to say is during that class, it was a pleasure to meet so many qualified town employees that really enjoy their job and really are looking out for the residents. It was a wonderful experience.
Great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you. All right. Okay, now moving on to Miss Hurwitz. Hi. So you have a couple of different committees that you have expressed interest on. The Sandy Neck Board actually has no current vacancies, but the vacancies that will be available on the end of the fiscal year are for positions that are members of other committees. So it would be very difficult to appoint you to those unless you were already a member of the Conservation Commission or the Recreation. So I think we'll probably take that one off the list. If you're still interested in the Sandy Neck Board at the future, we can keep you on the, you know, if there's an at-large membership, you know, that could be a possibility. Yeah, so in the future. Water Committee, I'm jumping over the shellfish, but the Water Committee currently is not an active committee. The council has not. Yeah, the water quality.
Okay.
It hasn't been disbanded officially, so it still exists on our website, but it's not currently an active committee. So we wouldn't be filling any vacancies on that one.
Oh.
And I say that, you know, maybe there might be a reemergence of it at some point. So that's why I think the council hasn't wanted to strike it. The Waterways Committee currently has no vacancies, but there is one person up for reconsideration. Cindy, do you want to confirm if that person has expressed interest in reappointment?
Yes, they have.
Okay. All right. So that is a committee position you could be interviewed for. And then Shellfish Committee, there are 2 people that are up for reconsideration and a current vacancy. And that current vacancy is one that the Appointments Committee has already put forward a recommendation. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah.
Cindy?
There is somebody that you interviewed last week, who jumped into or is on the town council agenda for approval for the trained professional.
Okay.
But we do have a member holding a family permit open and one that has not gotten back to me yet as to whether or not she would like to be reappointed. So technically there are 2 positions.
Okay. And are they both positions that require having a family member permit?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So, Ms. Hurwitz, if you are currently holding a shellfish permit or might in the near future,
I have one.
you would qualify for those positions. So it looks like shellfish and waterways. And so do you have a strong interest to be considered for either one? at this
Well,
point in
it's-
time?
It does sound like Waterways doesn't actually have an actual opening at this point.
It
So-
will. Our policy is that any position that's up for reappointment is considered a vacancy. So, but it's just not available until July 1st. So if you have a strong interest in the Waterways, we could interview you for that. Again, there would be another candidate, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't take your interest in consideration. So.
All right, I do have a strong interest in the Waterways. I did go back and watch several of their meetings. And I did also watch the Shellfish. And as my husband said too, I'm open for suggestions. If after talking to me, you're thinking, no, I think you'd be better over here. All right, talk to me. I'm very happy. I would just really want to become involved in town government.
Okay. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then that'll help the committee members maybe direct their questions?
Okay, so my background is in education. I graduated college in '81 from UNH. I have a background in animal science, pre-veterinary medicine was what I studied. And then when I got out of school, I spent time, I was an assistant controller in construction. I did a lot of accounting work. And when I had my children, I decided I didn't want to go back to an office. I wanted something more interactive. So my kids were in school. I went back and got my master's degree in education, and then I started teaching 5th grade. So I taught 5th grade for about 10 or 11 years. And then I went from the classroom into a math specialist position. And in that position, basically what you're doing is you're a specialist in the schools so that you work with adults and you work with children. So like if a teacher doesn't understand a math concept, she can talk to me, I will come in, I'll actually teach the lesson. And I ran meetings after school because we have to get, certain professional development points. So I would help run these meetings and put these meetings together so teachers could develop more information. The other thing I did a lot of is since my first day in education, I have been a member of the teachers union and negotiated contracts, which was very interesting. But I spent most of my time as a PR&R representative. So it was my job, if somebody ran afoul of the contract, it was my job to be the liaison between the union member and the principal or the superintendent or whoever that happened to be with. So I did that most of my career. So I'd say about 25 years doing that. And been a member, a very active member, as I said, in the union, and very active in the classroom, very active with parents, PTO, fundraising. I mean, all the things that classroom teachers do. I mean, one of the reasons I didn't give you a resume is because as an elementary teacher, my resume comes in a 3-ring binder. So it's really kind of hard to just narrow it down to just one page of this is what I've done. You work with state government, you're aware of conflict of interest laws, you're aware of the fact that anything I wrote in school was public record. So any of my emails, any of my grade books, my lesson plans, all of those things, anybody at any time could say, I need to see that. And it was all recorded. So I'm very familiar with being in the public eye.
Well, thank you. Lots of experience. Council committee members, would anyone like to start with questions? Councilor Shaughnessy.
Hi, how are you? Congratulations on your graduation. Frankly, I'm in shock that Sushi and Deb Burnell didn't try to recruit you into their little crew because.
Well, I do have an email sitting in my inbox.
Oh, she is, because I'm like, I think you'd make an excellent in the inside Barnstable town government teacher, because it sounds to me that like that's right in your wheelhouse of educating adults about the different things that the town does.
Oh, I thought you meant the schools, because I do have an email from the schools.
Well,
saying
that's good too.
Volunteer opportunities.
I was gonna say that's great too.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking of Sue's eventual replacement.
Oh, I don't think anybody can replace Sue. She's amazing.
I would agree. I would agree. She really does run a great class. you know, and looking at your resume, I mean, the truth is, I feel as though you've got probably a great deal of experience in having to deal with not only teachers, parents, contracts, you know, and breaches of contract with teachers in being professional and impartial and respectful and, you know, all the sort of things that we think are important for our town boards and committees. Honestly, I think you'd probably be really well on either committee, and I think, you know, both committees could benefit from your being there. And again, you, just to clarify, don't necessarily have a preference. Just want to help out.
I would lean towards waterways.
Okay.
But if it didn't, it just really interested me because we've been on the Centerville River for over 40 years. And it's, you know, like this whole area, a lot of boating, a lot of fishing, I sail, you know, so just watching what they were talking about in some of the Zoom meetings, I was familiar with the area and I was aware of some of the challenges that they were particularly talking about, like the cut and Katuitt and, you know, the availability of space and how crowded that gets. So I also have experience in this area, in this environment, living here, knowing what some of the challenges are, knowing how July and August are completely different than all the other months. And it was very interesting to me to be part of that.
Yeah. Well, you know, as I'm looking at the Waterways Committee, you know, one thing I will note and something I know is important with the town is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I certainly think you could bring some diversity to the Waterways Committee.
I didn't miss that.
They do need that. So, you know, thank you so much for applying and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And you say your name, Glorianne?
It's like my legal name is Glorianne, but my nickname is Candy. So
okay.
I go by Candy. It just gets very confusing.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Hence
Thank you.
Counselor Starr, did you?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
All
Candy.
right. Counselor Atzlis?
No, I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Candy.
Oh, thank you.
I just wanted to pursue a little bit more of your interest in the waterways. And again, I have not actually been part of a lot of the committees there, but I'm on the water a lot. And so I am very cognizant of the kind of sometimes competition for our water, you know, that, you know, piers and docks and dinghies, and all that kind of stuff. So do you have any perspective of what is kind of a healthy ecosystem for our waterways?
Well, one thing which is obvious, I believe, is the sewer project. I'm so glad that that's happening. And I really feel that the town has addressed it in a very strong, intelligent way. I'm impressed with what they're doing. I wish it took less than 30 years, but you know, it's such a huge project that it's really, what can they do? They can't really make that much quicker. But I feel that's really important because I watch every year as it gets warmer here and I see the algae that builds up in the river, and I see by July the water temperature is so high. And it's concerning either for shellfish. I know myself, I don't shellfish once the water gets above 70 degrees. I'm too concerned. What am I harvesting? Do I really want to do that? And also once it gets really, really congested, my concern is how is the water quality? Or is it okay to harvest these? So I think that it's so important to stay on top of it, to make sure that all the decisions that we make are thinking of the future. So a balance between what do people want to do with the river or the waterways, and how can we channel that so that we're not making sure, so that we're not causing people to not be able to enjoy their property, or their boats, but on the other hand, being respectful of this isn't something you can use up and it will be okay. You've got to be aware of how your actions cause change in the water, and what are we doing and how are we addressing it. And earlier somebody was talking about education. I believe that was with conservation. And I think some education about what does the waterway need, and how can we provide it, and just, you know, maybe have people more aware. We're not too far from the town dock here on Centerville River, and I see people get in their boats and then just floor it. And where we are, the river opens up a little bit and they'll come by so fast, and it's like they're having fun, and that's wonderful, but they don't understand what they're doing to the grasses and what they're doing with their wake and how that's affecting erosion. And, you know, and I think if they knew, they wouldn't do that, because they don't want to harm this area. They want to enjoy it. And if we're not careful, there won't be a future the way we have it now. So that's my interest, really lies in finding that balancing point. I'm sorry, I'm talking with my hands. I can see it moving. Finding that balance point so that people can be enjoying themselves, but also not harming this really limited resource.
Okay, great, thank you. And you've probably heard my speech several times. So stay tuned. If you have any follow-up information you want to share with us, please, you know, provide that to Cindy. But I think we've gotten some good information from you tonight about what, you know, what your interests are and what might be a good fit.
And if there's any other committee you think I would be a good fit with, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to consider something other than what I listed.
That's great. Thank you so much for your flexibility. So
thank you.
And good night. And thank you for your patience for the long meeting.
No problem.
All right. And so we'll move to our last applicant that is on our agenda tonight that is available. One gentleman was not available, Mr. Spruill. So we are going to ask Kevin Ferreira.
Hello.
Last but not least on
That's
our
right.
agenda. Are you able to share your video so we can see you?
Yeah, I thought it was already on. I apologize. Hold on. I don't usually, there we go. I don't usually use Zoom. I use Teams. So Zoom is something I don't use that a lot.
All right. Well, thank you for your patience. It's been a long meeting. And I believe you also were a recent graduate of the Citizens Academy. All right.
I was. It was a great course. You know, a lot of people like to, as human beings do, complain, oh, this town, this, that, whatever. If people got a chance to actually, like I echo Larry's sentiments, to meet the people who make the decisions, who work with each other to try to make, all they're trying to do is make this a great community to live in. Sure, we all make good decisions, we make bad decisions, and you may agree or disagree, but these people have their heart into what they're doing. And I was very impressed by that. And I think it was because of my experience with it that I was inspired by these people and would love to be able to help them and work with them in any way possible to help out the town.
Okay, great. Well, you listed several committees that you might be interested in serving on. Some do not have current vacancies. Some will have vacancies as a result of the reappointment process. You have Community Preservation Committee, Historical, Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District, which actually does have current vacancies. The JFK Memorial Trust Fund, that is not going to have any vacancies. Is that right, Cindy? That's
correct.
Okay. So that won't be one that we would be considering tonight. And then you might have heard some of the previous interviews that we have some positions on planning board. Anything that you'd like us to focus our questions on? Is there any that pops up that is more interest to you than others?
Paula, I'll be honest, I humbly submit what, my skills or what I bring, and I would be happy to help in any way possible. I mean, I'd leave it to your good judgment and the judgment of the fellow counselors who would know what maybe my skills would bring. I want to, whatever I do, I want to succeed. I want to do well, not only for you who appointed me, but for the community as well. So whatever you think is in my wheelhouse, so to speak, I'm willing to help. If you look at everything I do and say, you know what, kid, see ya, that's fine too. I just want to, if I can, I would love to help in any way.
Okay. I'm going to jump and suggest, just because there are current vacancies and you wouldn't be going up, I don't want to say against, but current members of committees for reappointment, that the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District has some elements of historic, and you've also expressed historic, and it's a somewhat vibrant committee that gives you some opportunity, and we've added some new members, so that might be something that would be a good jumping off place. That doesn't mean these other committees, I mean, at any time you can apply for a vacancy or, being on a committee. So, this might just be a good sort of step into the process. And again, I'll look to my fellow committee members to see if they think that's a good direction or if they have other suggestions.
No, it sounds good to me. Can I pass it on to Nick to, Nick has a much more knowledge on this committee than I do.
What, you talking about recreation?
No, we're at this one. We're at CPC Historic, Hyannis Main Street Waterfront.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. I'm sorry. Yes. I mean,
so the Main Street.
I'm looking at all the X boxes here, and I'm still running through, which is great, Kevin. Thank you for being here, by the way.
Sure.
So, no, what I would like to do, instead of making, if I'm able to, Madam Chair,
Sure.
I'd like to take a little bit more time, since Mr. Ferrer has been so kind as to let us kind of choose his fate, so to speak. Be careful what you wish for. I'd like to take a little bit more time and look at his background and look at the different committees and provide some opinion. Then I'm not prepared to do that right now, but I'm sure we can recommend a couple of good options for him.
Okay.
If that's
Sure.
okay with you, Mr. Ferrer?
Absolutely. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself.
Sure, please do.
I was born in I'm born and raised in New Bedford. I came to Cape Cod in 1997. I got into radio right out of high school. I was going to be my boss at the restaurant I worked in convinced me, oh, you don't need to go to college. You got to become a restaurant manager. It's you'll have a career in that. Okay, that sounds good. And my parents didn't go to college either, so there was no strong push toward that area. So obviously, at one point, the restaurant thing stopped working, and I had to decide what I wanted to do. And I tried out, I took classes to be an EMT, and then I went into radio. And radio is where I fell in love with what I do. And I've been doing that for 34 years now. So I was I was in New Bedford for till 97. 97, I came here to work for 96 Through the Rose. Now I work on WCOD, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Programming for our stations, iHeartMedia Cape Cod. So basically WCOD, Cool 102, WEII, which is the sports station, and WXTK. So I basically run those, the programming for all of those stations. I've worked a lot in the community, a lot of community service. I think it's the most important thing that we can do in my business, that I can do, is try and help out. I mean, I've worked with, we've been doing for 20 some odd years, our Stuff-A-Bus that we do every single year where we raise Toys for Tots. I've worked with Cape Cod Cares for the Troops, the United Way. I mean, lots of different organizations. I'm very, very big on giving back to the community in any way that I can. Worked with a lot of businesses and business owners here, of course, with what I do on the Cape. So that's kind of in a nutshell, who I am and what I do.
And I apologize for saying the wrong last name for you.
No. Ferrer is the right name. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was first starting radio, I worked in New Bedford, and my name is Kevin Ferreira. And the program director at that time thought, well, that's too ethnic. Well, I was in like a Portuguese city. I don't understand what. So what I did is took my middle name, Matthew, and I just put an S on it. So Kevin Matthews is kind of my real name, but Ferreira is the real last name.
All right, so, okay, good. I just want to make sure. Thank you.
No,
I
you're
didn't-
good.
I have to apologize to the other candidate we had who was a doctor. I didn't refer to him as doctor, so.
You can
Okay.
refer to me as doctor if you'd like,
Yep,
Nick. That's
okay.
fine. I'll take it. I'll do that.
All right.
Oh, gosh. All right. Counselors, any questions for Mr. Ferrera Matthews? Right. Now, Counselor Atlas, do you feel like we want to table any, I mean, how do you want to proceed here? Do you think you have a better insight to see if we can push in one direction or another?
You know, being the liaison for the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront District, I mean, I'm selfishly speaking, I'd love to recommend him there.
Okay.
So that, I mean, I think that his, you know, working for the radio stations as he does, and you know, and he's obviously in tune, no pun intended, with what's happening in the community, since they're oftentimes reporting it and paying attention to what's going on. I think that I believe that that would be a good fit for him for consideration, and you know, I think and also he's given that your offices are in Hyannis. And, you know, I think that's also your knowledge of the area certainly is helpful. So yeah, I would want to make that, I would make that recommendation. Yes.
Okay.
It's just unfortunate that he's just not as outgoing as we want someone to be. So that's my only concern.
We don't want to discriminate against shy people. So
Right.
that's all right. Well, if that seems like a good fit for you, Kevin, we'll take that under consideration. Again, generally, we sometimes make recommendations at the end of this meeting, but we're going to defer all those to our next meeting. So just hold tight. We'll be making recommendations to the full council, and then it takes a couple meetings. So it'll be probably a month or so before you get any final word, but we will be back with you for sure.
No worries. Thank you very much
Right.
for giving me some time. And again, I hopefully I'd love to work with you and love to help to make Barnstable continue to be a great place to live.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again for sticking with us and being, and boy, I mean, radio does sound like a really good fit for you. So
thank you very much.
okay. All right. So we're done with our interview section of the evening, folks. And thank you, committee members, for your patience. We have one item of business that we have the ability to approve the minutes for April 11th, that 2023. You got that this afternoon, I believe. We can either move it today or we can table it for our next meeting. The pleasure of the committee.
I move to approve the minutes of the April 11th, 2023 meeting.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Cindy, could you take the roll call?
Certainly. Councilors Shaughnessy,
Yes.
Atsalas,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Chair of Committee, Councilor Schnapp.
Yes.
You have 4 yes, excuse me.
Okay. All right. We don't have any resignations. We're not going to make any recommendations tonight. Our next meeting will be May 9th. We'll keep the 4 o'clock time. It will continue with it'll be our last, no, it'll be a virtual meeting. If we have time on that meeting, we may add an agenda item to talk about our future meetings, but it might be a long meeting. So we might defer that for a future discussion. Anything else the committee would like to bring up before we ask for an adjournment?
So no,
Yes.
I haven't thought about how long these meetings go. You know, at one point people were assigned to, like a 15-minute slot. I don't know if anybody has any appetite to tighten it up a little, or it's not that but I appreciate the the conversation, and I've learned a lot. So it works both ways.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many people we'll have for the next meeting with all the reappointment.
we will have at least 3 planning board reappointment. We might have a Board of Health reappointment. So it'll be much fewer candidates
Okay.
for interviewing. Yeah.
Okay.
Counselor Aslis?
I do
Nick?
agree with I do agree with Counselor Starr that we should, because like we've all, I know me personally, I haven't paid attention to any sort of a time limit per candidate. And I think that given the numbers that we have, I would agree with Counselor Starr and support that. Should we go in that direction?
Okay. Yeah, you're absolutely right. When I was on the committee previously, we did have these slots, and then it was also a little easier for people not to have to spend the entire meeting because they didn't know when they'd be up
Right.
for. So, so let's look at that as another issue in terms of how we, organize our meetings going forward.
Okay.
So I agree. Last thing, I just wanted to suggest that we have a lot of information. There's a period of time here now that we've interviewed candidates, and I definitely would recommend maybe going back to some of the video, both for tonight and for the April 11th meeting before our May 9th meeting, just, to keep everything as fresh as possible for some of these committee positions. So.
Okay.
So we will also be doing a slate of the reappointments for those positions that we did not have to do any additional interviews for. So.
Okay.
All right. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Second.
First, second. Cindy, take the roll, please.
Counselors, Shaughnessy,
Yes.
Axelis,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Chair of Committee, Counselor Paula Schnapp.
Yes.
You are adjourned at 6:31 PM.
Thank you.